Howdy, howdy. Sudova here, and welcome to our sixth video in a series looking at Dowie versus Cav. And this series specifically is really looking at miners, dwarf warriors with great weapons, and longbeards with great weapons. These are three units that are really like the Dowie version of cheap anti-large, like spears and halberds, and this is what we've seen. They're very weak in actual melee combat, but it turns out they're very good against cav, and we've tested them against three types of cavalry and now one chariot, and now it's up for the biggest version of the chariots, the Gorbeast chariot. Now, in the testing, it's going to be kind of heavy spreadsheet work and testing. If you want to go to the summary, there will be a summary near the end of the video. Just fast forward to it. It will say a giant summary on the spreadsheet, and I'll talk a little bit about which units do best. We're also going to include in this testing just regular longbeards as sort of a pivot, an anchor, something that I've tested a lot of other things against. Regular slayers and slayers with great weapons to see where they sort of land. I also want to say I've gotten some comments on asking for some other testing, specifically testing combinations, which is really interesting, like miners and slayers, where you can have the miners take the charge and the slayers come in and get some kills. So you really, you can maximize that ability to resist the charge from the miners, where your slayers can't do it, and maximize your DPS. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually planning on making a summary video of all of these, where I'm going to put this all together to look at the Dowie backline, something I want to prepare for post of the next patch launch. I really want to do another video looking at the Dowie lineup very specifically. And I'm in that video, I'm actually going to put together a few little packages and look at the testing together and look at testing versus some other things and see if we can extrapolate some of the knowledge that we've gained by doing this testing. And this test specifically was actually a really tough one for the Dowie, because the Gorbeast chariot is anti-infantry with a big infantry bonus of 28. That's huge. Big weapon strength of 50, armor piercing, a charge bonus of 80, and they have a lot of mass, and they are a very strong chariot. And as a result, like you'll see, so in this testing in general, I've always wanted to set the tests up so that the units that we're going to test will win, so they always finish on the same side of the victory ledger, because some weird things can happen if you go between winning and losing. I've only had one test where I've actually had losses included in there, but to do that, we had to have 3 miners, and we even had to have 2 dwarf warriors, 2 longbeards. Like, these Gorbeast chariots are tough, and one of the problems is they cause fear. So it's a real leadership problem. Aside from doing a ton of damage really fast, they also cause fear. So against the miners, they can do a lot of damage really fast. So the same kind of testing. I really want to get in there and minimize the amount of charges, but I'll show you the test. I'll show you an example of the test in the video, and then we'll go to the spreadsheet and talk about what the numbers are and what they tell us. So let's get into the testing. And this was really interesting. I mean, these Gorbeast chariot, and there's a few other units that are going to be like this, like there are some other units of chariots, and there's like the griffins, like not the Royal Altar griffins, but there are some griffins that are anti-infantry and stuff like that. But anyways, we'll send our miners up against the Gorbeast chariot, and we need 3 groups of miners to win. They get in there, they muck them up, they can't move around really well, but they do a ton of damage, and you can see they're going to try and run away. And there were some wonky tests that weren't real perfect, but they end up doing a massive amount of damage to our miners, and 2 miners could not take them, not even close. And so we had to put 3 in there to sort of get our data. And it takes this is the test I did. I'm putting this test up so it can be repeated, and it is repeatable if you're looking at this test in the future and you wanted to test a future version of the miners. But there it is, the end of the fight. You can see they took a ton of health off our miners and finished in about 57 minutes. So we will go over to here, and look at what the actual data showed us. Now, if you're not familiar with how this works, what I do is I look at the start of the battle, the end of the battle, and figure out how many seconds the battle lasted for. I take the end hit points of all the troops in the battle, divide that by the finishing hit points, and compare that to the other unit, and multiply it by their gold to get a gold differential, so I can get a value out of there. I also measure DPS, damage per second, a gold per minute, how fast they're winning, and a gold ratio. So very, very good numbers with the 3 miners. They came at a value of 975. They have a lot of health, obviously. They pulled about 488 gold, which is really, really strong, but you need 3 miners to do it. I would definitely never send 1 miner after a Gorbeast Chariot. That's just a bad idea. And they pull it at about 201 gold per minute. Now, when we get into the next fight, the Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons. The Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons also have the issue that they do not have immunity to psychology, so that fear can really get to them. So you need 2 of them to pull that victory home. But they do reasonably well. It's not awful. So get these guys up here, and get that fight going. And you can see that initial charge. This unit just takes so much damage. It's funny they don't get a massive amount of kills. The kills start racking up as soon as they stay in there. They take them down to half health, and they've only got 11 kills. But then the regular Dwarf Warriors start winning reasonably quickly and start doing a lot of damage. And this is where I'll just end that. This is where the low melee defense really starts to come into play, and this is what originally spurred this testing was, hey, look at these Dowie units versus kind of these low melee defense cavalry and chariots, and can they do really good in this engagement? And the answer is yes. So the 2 Dwarf Warriors coming in at 1,000 combined are actually pulling a little less total gold than the 3 miners, 465, but a relatively decent. They pull it faster though at 257 gold per minute. So again, decent value, reasonable. Now we're going to go and look at our Longbeards, or just our basic Longbeards. Again, my favorite unit in the game, but we actually needed 2. 1 Longbeard just could not get the job done, even though they have immunity to psychology. So we had to get 2 Longbeards into this fight because the Gorbeast Chariot could pretty handily take out 1 group of Longbeards. So sort of the same kind of setup, because I want to make sure they get the charge off into 1 unit, and it generally lands at the same time, and they'll go back probably and they'll charge again. This battle takes quite a long time because Longbeards do have a lot of melee defense, 48 melee defense. They can hang in there, and that is one of the great things about the Longbeard. Yeah, here we go, and we'll come back for another charge. Boom. But they can hang in there for a very long time, and that's one of the great things about the Longbeards. They're just so robust in that front line because they can fight and fight and fight, and they, even against units that outclass them, they do hold that line for quite some time, and they will rally and come back, and they have encourage, and all these. There's so many good traits to the Longbeards. That's why I love them. Really, they're just my favorite unit. But as a comparison unit, it's good because I've tested them against so many things. It's really good to understand. But you can see they're both less than half health, and we'll see exactly how that finishes up when we go to the spreadsheet. So turns out they started pulling way less gold, 318, and they only pull it at 100 gold per minute. They do finish with about 47% of their health, but your Longbeards really start to show their weakness in this scenario. I mean, they hold them off for a very long time. The battle lasts over 196 seconds, but it's actually quite slow, and they're really starting to lose value. Now, interestingly enough, we go to... Oh, shit. Yeah, I replay this. I do this so fast when I'm doing my testing. I go over and over and over, and yeah, sometimes I accidentally hit rematch. All right, let's get out of here. See defeat. Yes, we'll end that battle. So, interestingly enough, the first unit that can single-handedly take a Gorbeast Chariot is our Longbeards with great weapons, the heroes of our last set of testing against Chariots specifically. Now, I ran this test. I had to run it one extra time because they did lose one, so we'll see. And it's tight because there's only one unit. But it was like they were both down to like 400 hit points or something like that. So I'll just show you the example of how the test looks. And they should win this. There's like an 85% chance they're going to win this fight. But you can see that the Chariots are winning off the get. And now as they sustain combat, that's when the Longbeards with great weapons start to win. And once they start winning, they really start to win. And you see, bang, there they go. 58-43, about a minute and a half, and we'll go and take a look what the data actually showed us. A very, very good Longbeards with great weapons. And they're not using their charge defense against large. They're just charging in there. All right, so see how they did. The answer is fantastic. Really, really good. They got the job done in 119 seconds, less than 2 minutes on average, and they pulled 512 gold. And they pulled it at 277 per minute. Again, a fantastic sort of appearance. Very, very good against these Gorbeast Chariots or Longbeards with great weapons. Outstanding. So, how do our regular Slayers do? So we'll just go and pick up our Slayers and see how they do in this fight. Longbeards with great weapons. Just another great showing. Like, they are absolutely a unit. If you're going to be fighting Chaos, need to have a couple in the back line to defend against Chariots, Cav, and they can even beat up on, those Poison Warhounds and stuff like that. But anyways, we'll go grab our Slayers and see how our Slayers do up against this Gorbeast Chariot. And, was it against the armor-piercing? No, the Slayers themselves did really poorly against the non-armor-piercing Cav. So we'll see how they do against this armor-piercing Chariot. And they get in there. You see the Gorbeast just run through them. Slayers do not have a lot of mass, and they're taking tons of health off the Slayers. But the Slayers start to pull it back, and that bonus versus large really starts to kick in, and they will win that every single time. They lose a lot of health, but that damage, once it starts to kick in, it really starts to kick in. So we will go and look. How much value did they pull? That's the question. 341, not bad. And they pulled it at 344 gold per minute. So not nearly as high value a unit as the Longbeards with great weapon, but they pull the value faster. They got the job done in 62 seconds, about half the time as our Longbeards with great weapons. Very, very good showing for our regular Slayers. They only finished with 28% of their health, though. Our Longbeards with great weapons finished with 26%. So that's what they did. So now, for our Giant Slayers. Giant Slayers is just one of the funnest units the Dowie have. They're that ultimate high-risk reward unit. And, we'll see how they do up against these Gorbeast Chariots. They tend to do really well against really expensive stuff. I mean, that's what they're meant to fight against. And the Gorbeast Chariots have, 120 armor. This is what the Giant Slayers are really meant to fight and excel against, is these really high armor, super expensive units. And remember, the worst they did, they actually lost a ton of value against Squigs. Like 300 gold or something. It was ridiculous like that. Something really high. So here we go. Let's get them to fight the Gorbeast Chariot. And again, no mass, so the Gorbeast Chariots just run through. But look at that health just dumping. Going down so fast. And bang. Done. This actually took longer than all of my other tests, which is really weird. So we'll go in and we'll see what those final numbers look like. Our Giant Slayers averaged 26 seconds. Half again of what our regular Slayers. So our Slayers killed them in half the time as our Longbeards with great weapons, and our Giant Slayers killed them in half the time as it took our Slayers. So they pulled very good gold at 482, but they pulled it at 1,126 gold per minute, like over 1,000 gold per minute, which is absolutely ridiculous. I just love those Giant Slayers. They're fun. They're a really fun unit. So what does that tell us? So we'll go to our summary here. The Gorbeast Chariot. I would say this is I think the number one unit against the Gorbeast Chariot is our Giant Slayers. They were number one with the hit points. I mean, they had what, I have all this data here. In their hit points, they finished with 56.5% of their hit points. You know, they were number one in the gold per minute. But the Longbeards with great weapons are very, very good too. They were number one in their gold difference, number 3 in gold per minute, number 1 in the gold ratio. Like, in this matchup against the Gorbeast Chariot, the Longbeards with great weapons and the Giant Slayers are very close, but they're incredibly different, right? The Giant Slayers, again, as we've talked about many times before, they get the job done in 26 seconds. One cast of Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and that Gorbeast Chariot is deleted. That's the beauty of the Giant Slayers. The Longbeards with great weapons, 120 seconds. You know, you're going to need two full casts, and then you're probably going to pick them off. But you know, you can put two Longbeards with great weapons in the back line for just a little bit more than one Giant Slayer. So you get a little bit more, and that's where the value sort of lies. Now, the weakest in this was just our regular Longbeards. They were 6, 6, 6, and 4, you know, for their actual where they finished in the group. For the number 5, or for the next lowest, it's almost our Slayers. And our Slayers didn't perform super good. They killed fast, but they were 5th in hit points, 5th in gold difference, and 5th in gold ratio. Whereas our Miners and our Dwarf Warriors are both close to each other. I'd say the Miners are a little more valuable in general, but you needed 3 and to actually get the job done. So I would say tied for first are Longbeards and great weapons and Giant Slayers. In general, depending on what you want to use them for in this sort of situation and scenario, and then you have to look at your Miners and Dwarf Warriors with great weapons after that. Your regular Slayers are okay, but they lag far behind in terms of their overall value compared to your Longbeards with great weapons and your Giant Slayers. So that's sort of the summary when it comes to the Gorbeast Chariot. Now, I'll go over a little bit of chat about where I want to go with the next couple of videos. We'll quit that battle and we'll end it. And I think I want to do one video that summarizes all the testing. So where I'm going to look at the Miners, Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, Longbeards with great weapons, Slayers, and the Giant Slayers. And I will look at them in context of each other and all the testing that we've done. We'll talk a little bit about backline. We'll talk a little bit about combinations, like the Miners and the Slayer might be an amazing combination, right? You have the armor piercing with the non-armor piercing non-armored. Like, this is just intuitively, this is a great combination, which has been mentioned in the chat and in the comments. And, you know, you have sort of choices of how you want to run your back line. The Longbeards with great weapons are a stable unit in that back line. Very, very good. They're a good bodyguard unit for our heroes and this sort of thing. I think I want to really look at, up against, just do a little bit of group testing against some other units for just fun. Like, you know, look at the Empires, like I said, the Griffins. Where are they? The Demigryph Knights. No, the Demigryph Knights. They're armored and shielded, armor-piercing anti-infantry. You know, these are, and they cause fear. You know, do a little bit of testing against some of these fun units, and maybe a few units here and there, and to really summarize these backline units and talk about the backline packages that you can put together as a Dowie player and where they fit in. So I would definitely love to hear from you. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments about this test specifically. It's another test where the Longbeards with great weapons shone through. Very, very good. And where the Giant Slayers look amazing. Really amazing. So strong. What are your thoughts on the testing? What are your thoughts on the summary? Is there anything in specific you'd like me to summarize or just to chat about when we're going over this in the video? I'm going to try and put all of the data together in one page so we can sort of see it. I don't know how I'm going to do it precisely, but I just want to sort of talk about where these guys fit into the pantheon of the Dowie anti-large in terms of each other and really what their specific role is. and where they can really excel. So where I really want to cover how to think about these units when you're putting together your backline packages. You know, what you want to use them for, and what roles, and what factions you'd like to use them against. I mean, it's, you know, like there's some very clear, like you definitely don't want Slayers or Giant Slayers against the Greenskins. You know, I get it. The Slayers are going to be great against a Giant specifically, but so are Quarrelers. Quarrelers are amazing against a Giant. Giant Slayers will be great against an Arachnarok, but Thunders are great against their Arachnarok. Where we saw the Slayers and the Giant Slayers do really terribly is against Squigs, which is something you do see. You know, and they're going to do bad against nasty Skulkers and Goblins and stuff like that. And this is where units like our Miners and our Longbeards really showed up. Yet there's situations where you know you're going to have expensive large units against the Dowie. This is where a Giant Slayer will be worth the risk because they kill so fast. Maybe a Giant Slayer is worth the risk against Chaos, because Chaos doesn't have a lot of units that can get to your Giant Slayers. They do have the Marauders with throwing axes, but if you have a little bit of backline ranged, you can kind of fend them off, and your Giant Slayers can beat up Kolek, they can beat up Sathoril, they can beat up, you know, Gorbeast Chariots, you know, they can beat up Cavalry, these types of things. You know, that's the sort of thing that I want to talk about in this last video. So I'd definitely like to hear from you in the comments, your thoughts about the Dowie anti-large, and your thoughts about the testing in general, and anything you'd like to see summarized, and I will try to get it in. You know, I don't get to every single comment, I don't get to every single testing idea. There's so many I have in the backlog. It's absolutely, I have like a mass amount of testing I want to do, and I know that the Vampire Coast is going to be dropping soon, and I'm going to want to do a massive amount of testing with the Vampire Coast as soon as they drop, so I can get some information to you guys as to which units really test out to be very strong in multiple situations. Specifically, I want to make sure I test against those Vampire Infantry, the Depth Guard, and the human infantry, the Sartosa Pirates or whatever. I want to make sure that we have a very clear answer to that, the Dowie do, in terms of the infantry engagement, so that you can actually build your army with confidence that if you do have a lot of them Sartosan Pirates, you know, you're ready for that. So I want to get to that. So anyways, love to hear from you. Looking forward to some comments. And with that said, I will see you soon.